Contingency or retained, which recruitment model actually fits your SME? Here's the direct answer. If the role is well-defined, mid-level, and you need it filled fast, contingency is almost always the right call, because you only pay on a successful hire. If the role is senior, hard to fill, or needs to stay confidential, retained search is worth the upfront commitment, because it buys you a completely different kind of search. At Carriera, we run both models, and picking the wrong one is one of the most expensive mistakes an SME can make when hiring, not because either model is bad, but because using the wrong one for the role wastes months. So let's break down exactly what each model actually is, what they cost in Malaysia, and how to decide which one your next hire actually needs. Contingency recruitment means the agency only gets paid if you hire one of their candidates. No hire, no fee. There's no retainer, no deposit, nothing owed if the search doesn't land. Because the agency isn't paid until a placement happens, the practical incentive is to move fast and surface candidates who are already active people currently applying, currently looking, currently on the market. That's not a criticism of the model. It's just how the economics work. The faster an agency presents someone you hire, the faster it gets paid. Multiple agencies can usually run the same contingency search at once, which adds speed through competition, but it also means the search is what we'd call a surface sweep. It covers the people who are actively looking, not necessarily every person who could do the job. Retained search flips that incentive completely. You pay an upfront commitment, usually staged across the search, for example, a portion to start, a portion at shortlist, and the balance at hire, and in exchange, you get an exclusive, structured search, a documented long list, real market intelligence on salary and availability, and access to passive candidates who aren't applying for anything because they're not actively looking. Because the agency is paid regardless of speed, the incentive shifts from submit fast to find right. Retained search is deliberate and thorough. It's not built to be a quick fill, and it usually comes with a replacement guarantee if the hire doesn't work out within an agreed period. It's also the higher confidentiality option, which matters when you're replacing someone currently in the role or hiring for a position the market shouldn't know is open yet. Here's the comparison that actually matters when you're choosing. On payment timing, contingency pays only on a successful hire. Retained is an upfront commitment, usually staged across the search. On exclusivity, contingency is typically non-exclusive, so several agencies can compete on the same role, while retained is exclusive to one agency. On search depth, contingency is a surface sweep of active, applying candidates, while retained is a full market map that includes passive candidates who aren't job hunting at all, and on what each is best suited for. Contingency fits mid-level, recurring, urgent, clearly defined roles, while retained fits senior, specialized, confidential, or genuinely scarce roles. The fee range itself sits on the same scale for both models in Malaysia. Published market figures put recruitment fees at roughly 14 to 37% of the placed candidate's annual salary, but contingency tends to land at the lower to mid-end of that range, and retained tends to sit at the upper end because you're paying for a deeper, more exclusive search process. This is the part most SMEs underestimate. According to SHRM data, the true replacement cost of a bad hire typically runs between 50 and 200% of that person's annual salary. Once you count lost productivity, retraining, and the cost of redoing the search, and for executive or C-suite roles, that cost leans toward the 200% mark. Even the U.S. Department of Labor's more conservative baseline puts it at around 30% of first-year salary. So the cheaper headline fee is not always the cheaper outcome. A contingency search that fails and has to restart twice can end up costing more than one deep retained search done properly the first time. There's also a compliance question worth clearing up here because it comes up constantly. Can you claim recruitment agency fees under the HRD Corp levy? No. Recruitment placement fees are not training. so they cannot be claimed under the HRD Corp levy, which specifically funds approved training under the PSMB Act, 2001. For context, that levy itself is 1% of monthly wages, and it applies to employers with 10 or more Malaysian employees. But it's a training budget, not a hiring budget, and the two shouldn't be confused when you're planning costs. Use contingency when the role is well defined, the salary sits below the senior band, you're hiring repeatedly for a similar position, there's real urgency, and qualified candidates are actively in the market. Use retained when the role is senior or business critical, the skill set is scarce, confidentiality is required. For example, you're replacing someone currently in the seat or a previous contingency attempt already stalled. There's also a middle option some agencies offer, an engaged or container model, where you pay a smaller upfront retainer plus a success fee. That gives a senior role a level of exclusivity and commitment without the full retained outlay, worth asking about if neither pure model feels right for the seat you're filling. So to recap the direct answer, for a well-defined, urgent, mid-level role, contingency is almost always right. You pay only on a successful hire. For a senior, scarce, or confidential role, retained search's upfront commitment buys you an exclusive search into the passive candidate market, and it usually works out cheaper than a failed contingency search repeated twice. At Carriera, we don't publish one fixed percentage for either model. We look at seniority, scarcity, urgency, and salary band first, then recommend the model and quote accordingly. And we've done this across more than 50 companies. If you're not sure which model your next hire actually needs, message us on WhatsApp. That conversation costs nothing, and the full written breakdown, including the frequently asked questions on HRD Corp claims, is on carriergroup.com.my.